Sucker Nation? Welcome back once again. It's your host, the G-Man, as we continue with our 2016 team-by-team fantasy preview. Today we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons. There's certainly some talent to be had there on the Falcons. They're a much better fantasy team than I think they're going to be a real team. I think they're going to be mid-level, but you can find some fantasy gems for your fantasy draft to be sure. Start at the top with Matt Ryan, a quarterback. Matt Ryan will probably put up numbers that are borderline late number one, early number two. If you can get him as your second quarterback, great. But you could do a lot worse than him as your starter, not because he's going to blow you away with his numbers, but because he is super consistent. You're not going to get very many 188 yards passing, no touchdowns, and an interception games that basically just lose you a week. Matt Ryan doesn't do that. He's very consistent. He has a great receiver to throw through, which we'll get to in a minute. So from a consistency standpoint, he's probably better to take a shot at as a number one, late number one. If you wait on your quarterback to late rounds, he's a decent option. Running back, Devontae Freeman came out of nowhere to just dominate last year, including all the touchdowns. I don't think he can do that again. I think he will be a better player for them if they limit his touches a little bit. He's going to get beat up. He's not a huge guy. It's not to say he's small. He's just short. I think he'll do better with 210 carries and 50 catches, so 250 to 260 touches overall. If he gets double-digit touchdowns again, I'll be really, really surprised. I just don't think they're going to be that kind of team. Let's say 9 touchdowns. That still makes him a number one running back. This is not a shot at Devontae Freeman. I think he's a hell of a player. I just think if they use him correctly, he won't have that value. Tevin Coleman is an interesting guy in that he was the starter last year. They wanted him to be the starter. He got dinged with a concussion, and that was it. Freeman took off the job, never gave it back. Coleman certainly has the talent to be a starter. And if something happens to Freeman, you can plug Coleman in immediately, and he will give you the same production. Until that point, he's going to work in. I think he's probably still rosterable as a fourth running back, but if something happens to Freeman, he becomes a number one pretty quickly because I think he has a similar skill set and will do the similar things. Julio Jones is a top 3 fantasy wide receiver. Probably third. I probably put Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham in front of him. The numbers last year are just sickening. I mean, he was unbelievable. He actually got in the end zone a little more last year, which helped his overall numbers. He struggles with that sometimes, but 1,300 yards and 7 to 9 touchdowns, that's a clear number one wide receiver and probably a top 5er to me, so easy. Mohamed Sanu, I put him as a backup. He's not a fantasy starter if you have a 3-receiver set. I'd say he's your 4th wide receiver. Probably going to be good for 70 catches, 900 yards, maybe 6 touchdowns, maybe 7 touchdowns. Justin Hardy is just another guy in the slot. I don't even think in a PPR perspective he's going to help you too much. My guess is their best tight end becomes Austin Hooper, and I think eventually he can be pretty good. But as a rookie tight end, they just don't ever seem to produce, and there's a lot of other options out there at a tight end position. I wouldn't draft him. Maybe keep him as a bye-week replacement for the end of the year when he kind of gets his feet under him and he starts to learn the offense and they start to utilize him more. Defensively, surprisingly, Atlanta, despite not being a decent defense, does turn the ball over a lot. They play that aggressive style that Seattle used to play with their defensive coordinator, now the head coach. And you could do worse than them as your backup defense, even a late starting defense, Atlanta. And certainly if they're a bye-week replacement, they're absolutely a hell of a fill-in for you there. So there's a lot of options to be had on draft day from the Atlanta Falcons. And with your 2016 team-by-team fantasy preview of the Atlanta Falcons, as always, I'm your host, the G-Man, and I am out.